you do if a single video call shattered everything you believed about your marriage? When Sarah noticed her sister's phone on her pillow during a routine call with her deployed husband, she had no idea she was about to uncover a betrayal so deep it would destroy her family. But what she did next shocked everyone who tried to bury her alive. This is a story of a woman who refused to be a victim, who turned her pain into power, and who proved that sometimes the quietest revenge is the loudest victory. If you're ready for a story that will leave you breathless, make you believe in justice, and restore your faith in the strength of the human spirit, then stay with me until the very end, because the twist in this tale will haunt you long after it's over. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel because we bring you real stories of real people who refuse to let betrayal define them, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at my laptop screen, waiting for Michael's face to appear on the video call like I did every Tuesday and Friday evening at 7 o'clock sharp, because when your husband is deployed overseas for 9 months with the military, these scheduled calls become your lifeline, your oxygen, the only thing keeping you tethered to the man you married 5 years ago in a small church ceremony where we promised forever. And I believed him, God help me, I believed every word that came out of his beautiful lying mouth. The screen flickered and there he was, my Michael, with that smile that used to make my heart skip and his green eyes that I'd fallen into like a warm ocean. And we talked about nothing and everything the way couples do when they're separated by thousands of miles and time zones. He told me about the heat and the sand and the terrible food. And I told him about my job at the elementary school where I taught 3rd grade, about how Mrs. Henderson's cat had kittens, about how I'd repainted the guest bedroom the soft blue color we'd discussed before he left. Normal, mundane, beautiful things that made us feel close despite the distance. Then I shifted on the couch in our living room, adjusting my position to get more comfortable, and that's when I saw it in the background of his video feed, on the bed behind him in what I knew was his private quarters, sitting right there on his pillow like it belonged there, like it had every right to exist in that space, my sister Emma's phone case, the distinctive rose gold case with the stupid cartoon cat stickers that she'd shown me just 2 weeks ago when she'd come to keep me company, while Michael was away, the same sister who had held me when I cried about missing my husband, who had slept in our guest room, who had eaten at our table and sworn she was there to support me through the loneliest months of my life. My blood turned to ice water in my veins and my mouth went dry as the Sahara, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything because my brain was scrambling to make sense of what my eyes were seeing, trying to find some innocent explanation for why my sister's phone would be on my husband's pillow in a military base halfway around the world. And I smiled and nodded and said something about being tired and needing to go to bed early. And Michael smiled back with that perfect smile that I now saw for the mask it was, and we said our I love yous like we always did. And I closed the laptop with trembling hands that didn't feel like they belonged to my body anymore. I sat there in the growing darkness of my living room for 3 hours, not moving, not crying, just thinking and planning, because I am my father's daughter and my father taught me that when someone hurts you, you don't react with emotion. You respond with strategy, you wait and you watch and you gather your evidence and then you strike when they least expect it with the force of a hurricane they never saw coming. The next morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, and I drove to Emma's apartment across town with a spare key she'd given me for emergencies, and I let myself in while she was at her job at the marketing firm where she worked, and I searched every corner of her life with the methodical precision of a detective because if she could betray me this deeply, I needed to know everything. What I found in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, hidden beneath old magazines and random papers, made my hands shake so violently I almost dropped the evidence. Plane tickets to Dubai from 3 months ago, hotel receipts for romantic suites, photographs of them together printed out like treasures, my husband and my sister wrapped around each other on beaches and in restaurants and in bed, and text messages I retrieved from her laptop that she'd been stupid enough to leave logged in. Messages that went back not 9 months but 2 years. 2 whole years of "I miss you, baby," and "I can't wait until we can be together," and "she's so clueless she has no idea," and worst of all, the plans they'd made. The detailed, careful plans about how Michael would come home from deployment and ask me for a divorce, make up some story about growing apart, and then after a respectful 6 months he and Emma would coincidentally start dating and everyone would think it was just 2 lonely people finding comfort in each other after a difficult time. I photographed everything with my phone, every receipt, every message, every single piece of evidence that proved their betrayal was not some impulsive mistake but a calculated long-term deception. And then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it because they couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. Not until I was ready to destroy them both with the same methodical planning they'd used to destroy me. I went home and I cried for the first time. I cried until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw and I couldn't breathe through my nose. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. For the sister I thought I knew. For the 5 years I'd given to a man who was probably laughing at me with my own blood relative. And then I washed my face and made myself a sandwich and started planning their destruction because grief is a luxury you can indulge in after you've had your revenge, not before. I called my best friend from college, Rebecca, who had become a divorce attorney specializing in military family law, and I told her everything, and she told me exactly what I needed to do to protect myself financially and legally, how to document everything, how to secure my assets, how to make sure that when this bomb exploded Michael would lose not just his marriage but potentially his military career because adultery is actually punishable under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and Emma would lose her reputation and the family connection she'd relied on her whole life. Then I called my Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister who had never particularly liked Emma because she said Emma had a streak of selfishness wider than the Mississippi. And I told her I needed to plan a surprise welcome home party for Michael's return in 2 weeks, a big celebration with all our family and friends, and could she help me organize it? And sweet Aunt Margaret, who loved nothing more than a good party, said of course she would help. She would make it the biggest celebration our family had ever seen. Over the next 2 weeks I was an actress worthy of an Oscar. I talked to Michael on our scheduled calls with a smile on my face and love in my voice. I invited Emma over for sister dinners where we drank wine, and she told me how hard it must be to be alone and how proud she was of me for being strong. And the whole time I watched her lie to my face with such ease it made me wonder what else in my life had been a lie. If anything anyone had ever told me was true, or if I'd been living in a house of cards built on deception, and it had just taken me this long to see it. I confirmed the party venue, a beautiful event space at a local hotel with floor-to-ceiling windows and a capacity for 200 people, and I invited everyone, our parents, Michael's parents, all our aunts and uncles and cousins, our friends from high school and college, people from my work, people from Michael's unit who were also coming home, everyone who knew us as a couple, as a family, as people who supposedly loved and respected each other. I hired a professional photographer and videographer because I wanted everything documented. I ordered a massive cake that said, "Welcome Home Hero" in red, white, and blue icing. I bought a new dress in blood red because I wanted to look like the Victor I was about to become, and I sent Michael and Emma each their own special invitation. Michael's went through official channels to his base telling him about the surprise celebration, and Emma's I delivered personally with tears in my eyes telling her how much it would mean to me to have my sister there when my husband came home. And she hugged me and said she wouldn't miss it for the world. And I felt her arms around me and wondered how those same arms had held my husband, while they laughed about what a fool I was. The day of Michael's return I woke up at 5 in the morning with a clarity of purpose that felt almost divine, like the universe itself was aligning to give me this moment of justice, and I got ready with the care of a warrior preparing for battle. Every detail of my appearance perfect, from my hair to my makeup to the red dress that hugged my body like armor. And I went to the airport alone to pick up Michael because that's what the loving wife would do. And when he came through those gates in his uniform looking tired and guilty if you knew what to look for, I ran to him and kissed him and told him how much I'd missed him, and he held me and said all the right words, and I wondered if he was thinking about Emma the whole time, if he was already planning how to break my heart in a way that would make him look like the good guy. I told him in the car that there was a small welcome home gathering that some friends had insisted on throwing together. Nothing too big, just a casual celebration, and he smiled and said that sounded nice, and I watched him text someone on his phone. Emma probably warning her, making sure their story was straight, and I smiled to myself because it didn't matter what they planned, nothing could prepare them for what was coming. We walked into the event space at 7 o'clock and it was packed with people, everyone cheering and clapping, and Michael's face lit up with that fake humble hero smile. And Emma was there near the front looking beautiful in a blue dress, and she came up and hugged him appropriately, sisterly, nothing that would cause suspicion, and then she hugged me and whispered, "I'm so happy for you," in my ear. And I whispered back, "Are you really?" And I felt her stiffen, but I pulled away before she could see my face. I took the microphone that Aunt Margaret handed me and I waited for the room to quiet down. 200 people who had come to celebrate love and loyalty in military service, 200 witnesses to what was about to become either the most epic moment of justice they'd ever seen or the most dramatic public meltdown. and I didn't care which they thought it was because I knew my truth. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight," I said, my voice strong and clear through the sound system. "To celebrate my husband Michael's return home from his deployment. These 9 months have been so difficult, so lonely, but I've learned so much about who really supports you in your darkest times and who." I paused and looked directly at Emma, whose face was starting to show the first signs of panic. "Who stabs you in the back while pretending to hold your hand?" The room went silent, confused murmurs rippling through the crowd, and I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projection system we'd set up for the slideshow of memories I told everyone we'd be showing. But instead of happy photos from our marriage, the first image that appeared on the screen was a text message conversation between Michael and Emma, blown up 15 feet high for everyone to read. "Can't wait to finally be together without hiding. And she actually thinks we're both here to support her. It's almost too easy. And just a few more months and we can stop pretending." I watched my husband's face drain of all color and Emma started to move toward the door, but Aunt Margaret, bless her, had positioned herself right there, blocking the exit with her substantial frame and a look of pure fury on her face that could have melted steel. "For 2 years, I continued, my voice not shaking even though inside I was vibrating with adrenaline and rage and grief and power. "My husband and my sister have been having an affair, 2 years of lying to my face, 2 years of planning how they would destroy my life and make it look like a natural end to a marriage, 2 years of making me feel like I was crazy when I sensed something was wrong, making me doubt my own instincts and my own worth." I clicked to the next slide, photos of them in Dubai, tangled together in ways that left no doubt about their relationship, and I heard gasps and angry murmurs and someone's grandmother saying, "Lord have mercy," in a shocked voice that would have been funny if this wasn't my life falling apart in front of everyone I knew. I found plane tickets, hotel receipts, thousands of text messages, and a detailed plan for how Michael would divorce me after this deployment, and then after a respectful waiting period, he and Emma would start dating, and everyone would think it was a beautiful love story about finding happiness after heartbreak. Michael finally found his voice and tried to say, "Sarah, please, this isn't." But I cut him off with a look that could have stopped traffic. "Don't you dare," I said, and my voice was ice now, cold and hard and deadly. "Don't you dare try to lie to me in front of all these people. Not when the evidence is literally 15 feet tall on that screen. Not when everyone here can see exactly what you've done. You don't get to control this narrative anymore, I do." I looked at my parents, whose faces showed shock and betrayal. My mother was crying and my father looked like he wanted to murder someone, and honestly I wasn't sure if that someone was Michael or Emma or both. And I looked at Michael's parents, whose son had just been exposed as an adulterer in front of his entire community and military colleagues because yes, I'd made sure his commanding officer and several people from his unit were here tonight. People who now knew he'd violated the UCMJ, and whose careers could be affected by association with someone facing potential court-martial. "Emma," I said, turning to my sister, who was now openly crying, mascara running down her face, "you came to my house, you slept in my guest room, you ate my food, you held me while I cried about missing the man you were sleeping with. What kind of person does that? What kind of sister looks into your eyes and lies with every breath?" She tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear it. I don't want your excuses or your justifications or your tears. You made your choices and now you get to live with the consequences. Everyone in this room now knows exactly who you are. Everyone in our family, everyone in our social circle, everyone who matters knows that you're the kind of woman who would betray her own sister for a man who was willing to cheat on his wife. And I hope he was worth it because you've lost everything else." I clicked to the final slide, a legal document, divorce papers already filed with the court, documents from my attorney showing that I protected all my financial assets, that I was suing for full ownership of our house based on his adultery, that I was seeking maximum damages allowable under military family law, and a formal complaint filed with his commanding officer detailing his violation of military code. "This party isn't a welcome home celebration," I said, my voice quieter now but somehow more powerful. "It's a goodbye party, goodbye to a marriage that was built on lies, goodbye to people who never deserved my love or trust, and hello to the rest of my life. A life where I will never again let anyone make me feel small or stupid or less than I am." I unpinned the military wife bracelet I'd worn every day for 5 years, the one with Michael's name and deployment dates engraved on it, and I dropped it on the floor and walked away, my red heels clicking on the hardwood floor. And I walked right past Emma, who reached for my arm, and I jerked away like her touch burned, And I walked past Michael, who was now being surrounded by angry family members and military colleagues who were asking him what the hell he was thinking. And I walked out into the cool night air with Aunt Margaret and Rebecca following me. And I heard Aunt Margaret say, "That was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed," and Rebecca said, "You were perfect, absolutely perfect." The fallout was nuclear and it was beautiful. Michael faced an Article 32 hearing in military court for adultery under the UCMJ, and while he ultimately received a non-judicial punishment rather than a full court-martial, he lost his security clearance, which effectively ended his military career in the position he'd held, and he was forced to take a massive demotion. The divorce went through with me getting the house and a significant portion of his pension and assets because adultery is one of the few grounds where fault still matters in divorce proceedings. And Emma, sweet Emma, who thought she'd get her happily ever after with my husband, she lost everything she'd taken for granted. Our parents were so disgusted they cut her out of family gatherings for almost a year. She became a pariah in our social circles because nobody wants to be friends with someone who would betray their own sister so completely. Her employer heard about the situation through the small world phenomenon of our interconnected community, and while they couldn't fire her for her personal life, suddenly her opportunities for advancement dried up and she was passed over for a promotion she'd been counting on. And best of all, Michael broke up with her 3 months after the party because it turned out that their relationship was exciting when it was forbidden and secret, but became toxic and resentful when it was exposed, and they actually had to face the consequences of their choices together. Emma tried to reach out to me 6 months later with a long letter begging for forgiveness, explaining that she'd been lost and confused and Michael had pursued her, and she'd made terrible choices. And I read the letter once and then I burned it in my fireplace with a glass of very expensive wine in my hand because forgiveness is something you give when someone deserves it, when they've shown genuine remorse and growth. And Emma's letter was full of excuses and justifications and attempts to make herself the victim of circumstance rather than the architect of her own betrayal. A year after that devastating video call that changed everything, I was living in the house that was now solely mine, teaching my third graders who brought me joy every single day with their honest enthusiasm and uncomplicated affection, dating a wonderful man named James who was a veterinarian with kind eyes and no secret agendas, going to therapy to deal with the trust issues and betrayal trauma that come from being deceived by the two people who were supposed to love you most in the world, and slowly, painfully, beautifully rebuilding my life into something that was mine alone, something that nobody could take from me because it was Bill.